The scream that tore from Emily's throat shattered the stillness of the apartment, echoing off walls that suddenly felt too narrow, too suffocating. Noah clung to her chest, his small arms trembling as though he sensed the storm that had passed and the greater one that was yet to come. David's face, once familiar and tender, twisted with betrayal and rage as he wrenched open the door and vanished into the night. The slam reverberated through the silence, a violent punctuation to years of sacrifice and struggle. Sirens moaned faintly in the distance, merging with the thundering of Emily's heart as her thoughts spun. Her tears blurred the world, but her grip on Noah tightened. The apartment felt like a battleground now, littered with memories turned to weapons. She could not afford to crumble. The betrayal had torn a wound deeper than exhaustion ever could, but even through the tears, something harder than grief began to take shape within her. Fear trembled in her chest, yet beneath it pulsed resolve. Tonight marked the breaking, but also the beginning of her fight for tomorrow. The silence that followed David's departure pressed against the walls like a weight. Every tick of the clock seemed louder, as though time itself mocked her fear. Noah's breath shuddered against Emily's chest, uneven and restless, as his body sought comfort in her arms. The room still vibrated with the echo of rage, its shadows long and unforgiving. She rose carefully, her legs trembling beneath the strain of exhaustion and dread, and carried him toward the couch. Her heart fought between despair and determination, each beat asking whether love could be enough to guard against betrayal. She brushed his curls back with trembling fingers and whispered a vow too soft for anyone but him to hear. The apartment, once a home, felt foreign now, a place of broken trust. Yet within its walls she clung to the fragile truth that he was her strength, and no fear would steal that away. By the window, Emily sat with her face bathed in cold moonlight, her gaze fixed on the restless street below. Each shadow moved like a memory, each sound echoing David's glare, his fists clenched, his smirk slicing through her resolve. The weight of that look pressed against her chest, but her arms refused to loosen around Noah. His small body shifted, a whisper escaping into the night, a child's fear-given voice. She kissed his forehead and breathed her reply against his skin, a promise rooted in trembling strength. The walls felt too thin to contain the storm within her, yet her love stood like armor around them both. Fear stalked her thoughts, but love kept her rooted. The stillness of the night offered no mercy, only the cold reminder that tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not. She closed her eyes briefly, clinging to a fragile spark of hope in the dark. The floor bore witness to what had been lost. A shattered photo frame lay among scattered fragments, its broken glass glinting cruelly in the dim light. Emily reached for it, her palms stinging as shards cut her skin, but the pain meant little beside the sight of the smiles trapped within the picture. Noah's innocent grin looked back at her, framed between her own joy and David's once proud expression. Her breath caught in her throat as memories rose like ghosts, haunting her with promises that had dissolved into bitterness. She pressed the cracked glass against her chest, ignoring the sting, as though clutching it could anchor her to something steady. But the truth pressed heavier than the wound. Those days were gone, dissolved into betrayal and fear. The past had abandoned her, and what remained was only the relentless march into a battle she could no longer avoid. Exhaustion dragged at Emily's body as she carried Noah into his small bedroom. The child's weight, once a burden, now felt like the only anchor holding her steady. She laid him gently onto the bed, his face softening as sleep washed away the tension etched there. For a fleeting moment, the room seemed untouched by the chaos outside its walls. Emily brushed his curls back, her fingertips tender against his skin, and whispered words of comfort meant only for him. At the doorway she lingered, her hand pressed against the frame, her stance protective and unwavering. The city's hum seeped faintly through the glass, reminding her that the world remained relentless beyond this sanctuary. Yet here, within these walls, she claimed a fragile peace. Her eyes burned with silent determination as she vowed that no force would tear him from her side. Tonight he was safe, and that was enough. Morning arrived with no mercy, its pale light seeping through thin curtains and exposing the fatigue etched deep into Emily's face. The quiet of the apartment was deceptive, fragile as glass ready to break. Noah stirred beneath the covers, still curled in the cocoon she had built for him, his breathing shallow but steady. Emily moved through the kitchen, the motions automatic, each clatter of dishes louder than she intended. Memories of David's fury replayed in her head, leaving her chest tight. The world outside demanded she keep going, her job waiting, the bills stacking, and her son needing more than fear could provide. She whispered reassurances to herself as if words could harden into strength. The betrayal of the night before lingered like smoke, yet she dressed with resolve. Today would be faced with weary eyes, but also with a mother's fire, no matter how fragile it burned. The city was already alive as Emily hurried Noah down the cracked sidewalk, her hand clasping his tightly. Traffic rumbled, horns blared, and strangers brushed past without noticing the weight pressing her steps. Noah looked up, his eyes searching her face for answers she could not give. The world demanded normalcy, yet nothing about their lives felt whole. Emily smoothed his hair, her expression tight with a smile that never reached her eyes. School loomed ahead, both a refuge and a reminder of the distance between them. She promised him stability, even while her own life crumbled beneath the surface. With every step, her mind turned to David and the threats she knew would come, each one more dangerous than the last. She held Noah's hand firmer, as if her grip alone could protect him from the storm gathering beyond the horizon. At work, Emily's body moved with habit, but her thoughts lagged behind. Papers stacked high on her desk blurred into shapes without meaning. Her supervisor's sharp gaze cut through the noise, each glance a reminder of how fragile her place here was. Whispers of company cuts floated across the office, and fear threatened to unseat her. The betrayal at home followed her into these walls, stripping her of focus, leaving her hollow. Yet she forced herself forward, her pen scratching, her voice steady when addressed, her mask carefully held in place. Every small victory felt like survival, each completed task proof that she was still standing. Beneath the fluorescent lights, she whispered silent prayers for strength, knowing one mistake could unravel the fragile life she was fighting to preserve. The battle for tomorrow was not only in courtrooms or homes, but in every relentless hour of her day. The evening stretched heavy as Emily sat across from Sarah, her closest friend, in a quiet cafe tucked between old brick buildings. The warmth of coffee steam contrasted the cold truth that poured from her lips. She recounted David's rage, the slammed door, the fear etched into Noah's eyes. Sarah listened, her brow furrowed, her hand resting gently over Emily's as if to anchor her. Trust was scarce, yet here it felt possible, a reminder that she was not entirely alone. Still, even this comfort carried shadows. Sarah hesitated before admitting she had heard whispers, things about David's intentions that made Emily's chest ache with dread. Betrayal now seemed to multiply, creeping into corners she hadn't expected. The cafe buzzed softly with chatter, but to Emily, the world had narrowed to this table, this confession, and the weight of what tomorrow would demand from her. Night descended once again, and the apartment felt smaller, its shadows stretching long across the walls. Emily tucked Noah into bed, her hands lingering in his curls as his eyes fluttered shut. But peace refused to stay. The silence carried whispers of David's threats, of the legal war she knew was coming. She stood by the window, watching the city pulse with life she no longer felt part of. Bills lay unopened on the counter, reminders of battles she had not the strength to fight. Fear pressed at her ribs, but she forced herself upright, unwilling to collapse beneath it. The night was a cruel companion, but it also sharpened her resolve. Tomorrow would bring trials that sought to strip her of everything, but she would not surrender. With Noah's breath steady behind her, she drew courage from the rhythm, each rise and fall a vow to endure. The week began under a heavy sky, gray clouds pressing low, as Emily walked Noah to school. Her steps were steady, but inside, every movement felt like a test of will. Noah clung to her hand, his voice soft as he asked questions she could not answer. Emily smiled weakly, hiding the truth beneath practiced warmth, telling him the world was safe even when it wasn't. When he disappeared through the school doors, she lingered, her chest aching at the thought of leaving him in a place she could not guard. The playground noise echoed in her ears long after she turned away, her shoulders hunched under invisible weight. Her resolve grew sharper with every step back home. She knew David would not relent, that his threats would soon take shape in legal papers and whispered accusations. Storm was gathering, and she braced herself to endure the first strike. Emily's apartment became her fortress, though its walls felt fragile against the storm pressing from outside. Bills lay in untidy stacks across the table, each envelope demanding more than she had to give. She stared at them, her chest tight, her eyes burning. The betrayal she felt from David bled into this moment, his absence like a wound that refused to heal. Noah colored quietly at the table, his small voice humming a tune that made the silence bearable. Emily watched him, drawing strength from his innocence, even as fear coiled tighter around her heart. Her mind rehearsed the battles to come, each argument she might face in a courtroom where truth often bent under pressure. She clenched her jaw, whispering to herself that she would not be broken. If she could not find peace, she would create it, even if it meant building it one fragile moment at a time. The first official notice arrived in the mail, a white envelope carrying the weight of war. Emily opened it with shaking hands, her eyes scanning words that threatened to rip Noah from her arms. Custody hearing. Allegations. Demands. Her knees weakened, and she sank into the chair, her breath uneven as the words blurred. Noah's laughter drifted from his room, piercing her chest with its innocence. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with betrayal. She pressed the paper against the table, fingers trembling as if holding back a flood. David's cruelty had finally taken shape, his manipulations no longer whispered, but written in ink. Emily's reflection in the window showed a woman exhausted yet burning with fury. She vowed silently that no judge, no lie, no betrayal would steal her child. Fear clawed at her, but resolve rose stronger, fierce as fire in the dark. That evening Sarah arrived, her presence a small light in the suffocating gloom. She sat across from Emily, her eyes steady, her voice urging strength. Emily listened, her hands wrapped around a cup of untouched tea, her body slumped but her spirit unwilling to surrender. Sarah spoke of lawyers, of strategies, of standing tall against lies. Yet even as the words filled the air, doubt gnawed at Emily's heart. She confessed her fears in whispers, the terror of losing Noah, of being judged unworthy despite every sacrifice. Sarah leaned closer, reminding her that the truth mattered, that love was stronger than cruelty. Emily's tears spilled quietly, but her shoulders straightened beneath the weight of resolve. In the quiet hum of the apartment, she felt less alone. Fear lingered, but for a moment it was drowned out by the fragile comfort of friendship and the promise of tomorrow's fight. Night returned heavy and restless, shadows creeping across the apartment walls as Emily tucked Noah into bed. His small voice asked if everything would be all right, his eyes searching hers for certainty. She kissed his forehead, whispering comfort, though her heart carried none. When his breathing softened into sleep, she lingered by the doorway, her hand resting against the frame as though holding the weight of the world. Alone, she sat by the window, the city lights blurring through tears. The custody papers lay on the table, their words echoing louder than any storm. She knew tomorrow would demand more than she had, yet she vowed to stand unshaken. Her love for Noah was a shield no betrayal could pierce. Though the night threatened to crush her, resolve flared within, fragile yet fierce. Emily whispered into the silence, promising herself she would not lose. The weight of betrayal pressed harder when Emily discovered the whispers were true. At work her position was questioned, her supervisor hinting at mistakes she had not made. David's shadow reached even here, poisoning her fragile stability. Fear clawed at her chest, but she stood silent, her pride refusing to let her crumble in front of strangers. She left the office with her pulse racing, clutching Noah's drawing from her desk like a shield. The city air was cold, its chill cutting through her thin jacket as if mocking her struggles. Every step home carried the weight of threats she could not yet see, but she felt them circling closer. Betrayal had multiplied, at home, at work, and within her own mind. Yet even as doubt pressed against her ribs, Emily's fire refused to fade. She whispered a vow into the evening air, a quiet promise that she would not surrender. Back at the apartment, Sarah's visit carried an unexpected tension. Emily poured her fears into the space between them, recounting David's manipulations and the threats to her job. Sarah listened, but her hesitation cut deeper than silence. She confessed she had known pieces of David's plans long before the storm reached Emily's door. Shock froze Emily's breath, the betrayal slicing through the fragile trust she had left. Tears welled, not from anger alone, but from the pain of realizing secrets had been kept in the name of protection. The apartment seemed smaller, its walls echoing with fractured trust. Sarah reached for her, voice thick with regret, but Emily pulled back, fear and fury coiling in her chest. Betrayal had stolen yet another anchor, leaving her alone again. Still, beneath the ache, resolve hardened. She would not falter, even if trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. That night, Emily faced the past in ways she had long buried. She opened an old drawer filled with letters, photographs, and fragments of a life she had tried to forget. Memories of laughter and promises surfaced, each one now sharpened into weapons by betrayal. Her fingers trembled as she held a picture of David, his smile once a comfort, now a reminder of cruelty. The air felt heavy, pressing against her chest, as if the room itself sought to suffocate her. Yet within the chaos of memory, her gaze shifted to Noah's face in each photograph, his innocence untouched by the storm. Her heart clenched with both sorrow and determination. The past had been lost, but the present remained hers to defend. She pressed the photo against her chest, inhaled sharply, and vowed that this war would not erase the love that anchored her to her child. The following morning brought no peace. A letter slid under her apartment door, its envelope thick with menace. Emily opened it, her hands unsteady, to find threats written in sharp legal language. David's cruelty had taken shape again, this time twisting words into weapons. Noah played nearby, humming softly, unaware of the battle looming overhead. Emily's body trembled as anger replaced fear, her resolve burning hotter than before. She folded the letter and locked it away, unwilling to let its venom stain Noah's fragile innocence. The day outside bustled with ordinary life, but within these walls, Emily stood at war. Her reflection in the window showed exhaustion, but also fire, a woman who would not be erased. Betrayal had tested her, but love fueled her strength. With Noah's laughter echoing behind her, she drew breath and stood taller, her vow etched deeper into the marrow of her bones. That evening, the walls of the apartment seemed to close in. Emily stood by the window, the city's glow reflecting in her weary eyes. The world outside moved on, uncaring, while hers balanced on the edge of collapse. She thought of David's rage, Sarah's hesitation, and the legal threats that stalked her steps. Fear pressed against her ribs, but her heart refused to break. Noah slept soundly in the next room, his steady breathing the only anchor she needed. Emily whispered a promise into the night, words carried on the silence like prayers. The road ahead was dark, filled with betrayals and shadows, yet she knew she would endure. She pressed her palm against the window pane, the city lights blurring into streaks, and drew strength from within. She was tired, but she was not broken. The battle was far from over, and she would rise to meet it. The knock on the door startled Emily, sharp against the quiet of evening. She hesitated, fear prickling her skin as Noah stirred from his toys on the floor. Slowly, she opened the door to find a figure she had not seen in years. Her Aunt Margaret stood there, lines of age carving her face, eyes filled with both sorrow and determination. The past rushed back, memories of estrangement and silence stretching over decades. Emily's chest tightened, torn between anger and relief, as Margaret's presence carried both answers and burdens. The woman's voice was steady as she said she had been watching from afar, waiting for the right moment. Emily's pulse raced, her instincts torn. Trust had cost her dearly before, but something in Margaret's expression spoke of truth. In that instant, the story shifted. The past had returned, not as a ghost, but as an unexpected ally carrying secrets of survival. Margaret's voice filled the living room as she explained truths Emily had buried. She spoke of David's lies, of manipulations she had seen but could not expose until now. Emily sat stiff, her hands clasped, eyes locked on the woman who had once abandoned her. Betrayal still burned, but Margaret's words carried weight, each sentence a thread weaving into the larger storm. Noah listened quietly, sensing the gravity, his wide eyes darting between them. Emily's heart wavered, caught between distrust and desperate hope. The revelations poured like cold water, shocking yet undeniable. Margaret admitted her silence had been guilt, but now she sought to protect what remained of family. Emily's chest heaved as she realized she was not as alone as she believed. Pain lingered, but within it rose the possibility of strength in numbers. The past was jagged, but perhaps it could still build something whole. The conversation stretched into the night, unraveling secrets Emily never expected. Margaret revealed how David had used his charm and lies to fracture bonds years ago, isolating Emily when she needed support most. Emily's throat tightened as old wounds reopened, the loneliness of her younger years now taking new shape. Noah had drifted to sleep on the couch, his small hand clutching a blanket. Emily brushed his hair gently, drawing strength from his innocence. Margaret's voice softened with regret as she admitted her failures, but also her willingness to fight now. The moment carried the weight of generations, pain spilling across decades yet pointing toward fragile redemption. Emily stared into her aunt's eyes and saw both guilt and resilience. The battle ahead was not only hers anymore. For the first time, she felt the possibility of an ally who could help her face the storm. The following morning, Emily awoke with uncertainty, but also a sliver of strength she had not felt in weeks. Margaret prepared coffee in the kitchen, her movements steady, as though she belonged here. The air was tense yet strangely lighter. Emily watched her, conflicted, wondering if trust could be rebuilt after so many years of silence. Noah's laughter filled the room, breaking the heaviness, his innocence untouched by the storms around him. Margaret glanced at him with tenderness, her expression betraying the regret of missed years. Emily's heart softened but did not fully yield. Betrayal had left scars too deep for instant forgiveness. Yet as they sat together, a fragile alliance began to form. Emily realized that though the past had been fractured, the future demanded unity. To survive the war David had started, she would need every ounce of help she could accept. That evening, Margaret placed an envelope on the table, her eyes steady, as she explained it contained evidence of David's manipulations. Emily's fingers shook as she opened it, reading documents that revealed lies too deep to ignore. Shock cut through her like ice, each page confirming the battles ahead would be more vicious than she feared. Her chest tightened, yet within the fear came clarity. This was no longer only about survival. It was about truth. Noah watched from across the room, his innocence shielded, but his awareness growing. Emily folded the papers, her jaw firm, her heart pounding with resolve. Margaret's gaze lingered on her, both urging and supporting. For the first time, Emily realized she had weapons to fight back, not only wounds to carry. The storm had grown darker, but she no longer stood alone. Strength surged through her, fierce and unyielding. The courthouse loomed large, its stone walls cold under the gray morning sky. Emily's heart raced as she walked through its doors, Noah's future hanging in the balance. Margaret walked beside her, steady and quiet, while Sarah waited with anxious eyes. Inside, the air was heavy, filled with whispers of others fighting their own battles. Emily sat at the wooden table, her hands trembling against the polished surface, her gaze fixed on the empty chair where David would soon sit. The weight of years pressed against her shoulders, but she inhaled deeply, forcing strength into her frame. She thought of Noah's laughter, of every sacrifice that brought her to this moment. The storm had gathered, and now it would break. Fear remained, but within it burned a fire that no betrayal could extinguish. Today was not just a hearing, it was a battlefield. David entered the courtroom, his stride confident, his eyes cold and sharp. He wore a suit, polished yet false, as though fabric could disguise cruelty. Emily's stomach clenched, her pulse pounding in her ears as their eyes locked across the room. He sat with his lawyer, papers stacked neatly before him, his smirk barely contained. The judge entered, commanding silence, and the proceedings began. Words flew like arrows, each one laced with accusation and defense. Emily spoke with a voice that trembled but did not break, recounting sacrifices, sleepless nights, and love woven into every choice she had made. David countered with venom, his voice smooth but empty. The walls seemed to shrink as the clash unfolded, truth and lies colliding in a battle neither could retreat from. The fight had begun in full, and there would be no turning back. The hours dragged on, every testimony tearing at Emily's heart. Witnesses spoke, some truthful, others poisoned by David's influence. Each word felt like a stone added to the weight on her chest. She clenched her fists beneath the table, forcing herself to endure. Her lawyer fought back, presenting evidence Margaret had provided, unraveling pieces of David's lies. The judge listened, face unreadable, eyes moving between papers and faces. Emily's gaze flicked to Noah, who sat outside with a caretaker, unaware of the war waged for him inside. Her voice cracked when she spoke of nights alone, of birthdays David missed, of tears hidden behind closed doors. The room grew still, her pain filling every corner. For the first time, David's confident mask faltered, his smirk slipping into a sneer. The truth had begun to pierce through his carefully woven web. The confrontation sharpened as David rose, his voice venomous, accusing Emily of weakness and failure. Each word stung, but Emily held her ground, her eyes fixed on the judge, refusing to let his cruelty shatter her resolve. Margaret squeezed her hand under the table, silent strength lending power to her heart. Sarah's steady gaze from the benches reminded her she was not alone. Emily's breath came fast, but her words grew steadier with each sentence, truth spilling from her lips like a shield against his lies. David's anger cracked through his polished exterior, his mask slipping, revealing the rage that lurked beneath. The courtroom air was thick, charged with tension, as though the very walls waited for the verdict. Emily's chest burned, but her spirit blazed brighter than the venom hurled at her. For Noah's future, she refused to bend. The day ended in silence, the gavel striking like thunder as the judge called for recess. Emily sat frozen, her body trembling from the storm of words and accusations. David left swiftly, his face darkened with frustration, his lawyer trailing close behind. Margaret remained by her side, steady as stone, while Sarah offered a quiet nod of encouragement. Emily exhaled slowly, her chest tight but her spirit unbroken. She thought of Noah's sleeping face, the innocence that had guided her through every shadow. This battle was far from over, but today she had not fallen. Her voice had been heard, her truth laid bare. The courthouse doors opened to the cool night air, stars faint above the city lights. Emily stepped into the darkness, her resolve fierce, her heart whispering that tomorrow she would fight again. For Noah, she would never stop. The courtroom was silent as the judge returned, papers in hand, his expression heavy with the weight of judgment. Emily's chest tightened, every second stretching endlessly as she reached for Margaret's steady hand. David sat across, his jaw tense, eyes burning with frustration masked beneath a calm facade. The words rang out with finality, custody granted to Emily. Relief flooded her body, so sharp it nearly broke her in half. Tears welled, not from weakness, but from the release of years of fear and sacrifice. David's face darkened, his silence louder than any outburst, but she no longer feared him. The gavel struck, ending a battle that had nearly destroyed her spirit. Emily inhaled deeply, her heart beating in rhythm with Noah's future secured. It was victory, but one carved from pain, its edges jagged with scars she would carry forever. Still, she had endured. The courthouse steps felt different now, each one lighter as Emily walked into the sunlight. Margaret followed close, Sarah beside her, their faces carrying relief and exhaustion alike. The air was crisp, the city's noise a reminder that life would go on. Emily paused at the bottom, her hand resting on the railing, her body trembling with the sudden release of tension. She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face, allowing herself to breathe fully for the first time in months. Yet beneath relief was the ache of battles fought, scars etched into her spirit. She thought of Noah, waiting with the caretaker, unaware of the storm that had been weathered in his name. The future was uncertain, but for now, she held the victory in her heart. Freedom was not the absence of fear, but the strength to keep walking despite it. Emily reunited with Noah in the courtyard nearby, his small body launching into her arms with pure relief. His laughter rang out, innocent and free, cutting through the heaviness that had weighed on her for so long. She knelt, holding him close, inhaling the familiar scent of his curls as if to etch this moment into eternity. Margaret watched from a distance, her eyes softened with both sorrow and pride, while Sarah smiled faintly, her arms folded against her chest. Emily whispered into Noah's ear promises of safety, her heart swelling as his giggles filled the air. In his embrace, she found her true victory, not in the gavel's strike, but in this quiet moment of love. The scars of battle would never fully fade, but they no longer defined her. She had fought, and for Noah, she had won. Together, they could begin again. That evening the apartment felt transformed, its silence no longer suffocating but peaceful. Emily cooked a simple meal, the scent filling the air as Noah set the table with pride. Margaret and Sarah joined, their voices weaving into warmth, laughter breaking the quiet. The walls that once echoed betrayal now carried the sounds of family, fragile but real. Emily glanced around the table, her eyes softening at the sight of Noah's smile, Margaret's calm presence, and Sarah's loyal strength. The weight of the past lingered, but it no longer owned her. Every bite, every shared word, was a reminder of survival, of love that had outlasted cruelty. For the first time in years, Emily allowed herself to believe in tomorrow. The storm had left scars, but within them bloomed resilience. Her heart whispered gratitude as the night unfolded in warmth and peace. Later, when the apartment was quiet and Noah had drifted into sleep, Emily stood by his doorway, her hand resting gently on the frame. She watched his small chest rise and fall, the steady rhythm a melody that soothed her soul. She turned to the window, the city glowing faintly outside, no longer threatening but alive with possibility. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman transformed, not unscarred, but unbroken. She smiled, soft and real, a smile that came not from pretending but from peace. She whispered a vow to herself and to Noah, a promise etched into the night. They had survived, they were stronger, and they would never stop fighting. The world was uncertain, but hope now lived in every breath they shared. Emily stepped into the room, sitting beside Noah, her presence a shield, her heart finally at rest.